The more than 2,700-kilometer Trans-Canada Keystone Pipeline would carry over 800,000 barrels of oil a day to refineries in Texas.
This is a story about a bold decision that shocked both locals and the world.
I will guarantee decisions on major projects within a maximum of 1 year.
Imagine cutting through a mountain, disturbing the peace of nature, and all for the promise of a brighter future.
Canada is energy rich and has the potential to be an energy superpower.
In 2013, Canada began one of the most controversial projects in its history.
The Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion is of vital strategic interest to Canada. It will be built.
A massive pipeline expansion that would cut through British Columbia's sacred land, disturb ecosystems, and put countless lives at risk.
This is sovereign Wet'suwet'en land. You are trespassing on Wet'suwet'en land.
It's also a major risk for Canada's geopolitical standing, at least under Justin Trudeau, because so much of the country's foreign policy has been geared towards reducing the threat of climate change.
The world laughed at Canada for even attempting it. But a year later, those same critics were left speechless as the full weight of this decision revealed itself, with consequences far beyond what anyone had expected.
Projects that diversify our export markets so we rely less on the United States.
The silent mountains begin to shake. Nestled between Alberta and British Columbia lies some of the most breathtaking, untouched nature in Canada. Towering mountains, pristine rivers, and dense forests had long been the pride of the region. For years, these peaceful landscapes were a world away from the bustling construction of cities, offering a serene escape for both locals and tourists alike. But in 2019, all that changed. A project worth over $30 billion kicked off, disturbing the tranquility that had defined this region for so long.
Canada is energy rich and has the potential to be an energy superpower.
Massive drilling machines were brought in, including one of the world's largest tunnel boring machines, to carve through mountains. Locals and indigenous communities braced themselves for the disruption, and ecologists feared for the safety of orca populations in nearby waters.
Oil and gas industry represents about 5% of Canada's GDP. The energy sector is one of the only industries in Canada that is growing.
The noise, the dust, the heavy equipment, it was a far cry from the peace they had known. But as the project progressed, some began to wonder if the end would justify the means. Was this aggressive development really necessary, or was it an irreparable mistake?
That's always a big mistake when the private sector says, hey, this is too risky a project.
What lay ahead in the wake of this controversial disruption? Little did anyone know, this was just the beginning of a much larger transformation. The Black Gold Rush. The roots of this ambitious project trace back to the mid-20th century, when vast oil reserves were discovered in Alberta. In 1946, Alberta's oil production was barely enough to meet the needs of its growing economy, with a meager 21,000 barrels produced per day. But everything changed with the discovery of some of the world's richest oil fields in the province. Just a year before the discovery, the province's oil reserves were estimated at only 72 million barrels. By 1957, that number soared to an astonishing 3 billion barrels. Canada, realizing the wealth beneath its soil, moved swiftly to meet the needs of the coastal province of British Columbia. At the time, British Columbia was relying on imports from the United States to fuel its development. With Alberta's black gold in hand, Canada saw an opportunity to capitalize not just domestically, but internationally. The solution was clear: a pipeline. A direct route from Alberta to the west coast would provide British Columbia with much-needed oil and open the door to sales to the booming post-war U.S. economy. But there was one significant challenge. The oil needed to be moved across difficult terrain, through mountains, rivers, and forests. The Trans Mountain Pipeline, or TMPL, was born. The pipe that wasn't enough. The original Trans Mountain Pipeline, completed in 1953, was crucial for transporting oil from Alberta to British Columbia, and eventually to the U.S. It was an engineering feat, providing a vital link for Canada's oil industry, especially as post-war demand for oil skyrocketed. However, by the 1980s, the pipeline had become inadequate. While it helped supply oil, it could only transport crude, and Canada needed more versatile infrastructure to meet growing domestic and international demands. In 1985, the pipeline was upgraded to carry refined products like gasoline and diesel. Despite these improvements, it became clear that the Trans Mountain Pipeline could not keep up with the growing oil production in Canada. The existing infrastructure was outdated, and Canada was looking for ways to modernize its oil transportation network. As oil demand surged, the question arose: how could Canada overcome its limitations and make its oil supply competitive on the global stage? A new dream takes shape. By the early 2010s, Canada was facing a new crisis. Its oil dependency on the U.S., nearly 98% of Canada's oil exports went south, and most of it came from Alberta's heavy crude. This oil was harder to refine and transport, meaning it was often sold at a discount compared to lighter oils. As a result, Canada's oil prices were being dictated by U.S. interests, leading to massive losses. In 2013, the Canadian National Energy Board received an application from Kinder Morgan to expand the Trans Mountain Pipeline. The proposal was to build a parallel pipeline to almost double the system's capacity. This expansion was crucial not only to meet domestic demand in British Columbia, but also to open new international markets, particularly in Asia. While the project initially carried a $6.8 billion price tag, the potential benefits were enormous. As Canada looked toward the future, the need for energy independence and greater global access became more pressing than ever. Now first, like always, be sure to hit the like button down below. It helps us out tremendously with the reach of this video. Thank you. Cutting through the mountain. The Trans Mountain Expansion Project, known as TMX, wasn't just about laying down new pipelines. The route it had to follow passed through rugged terrain, and one of the most daunting sections involved drilling through Burnaby Mountain. To accomplish this, the team brought in one of the largest tunnel boring machines ever used in Canada. This German-made machine, stretching 400 feet and costing $10 million, was responsible for carving a tunnel through the mountain. Operated by a 12-person team, working around the clock in 2 10-hour shifts, the tunnel's construction was disruptive to locals. The noise, dust, and vibrations caused serious concern. Indigenous groups raised alarms about the environmental impact on sacred lands, while environmentalists feared the toll on local wildlife. Despite these concerns, the government implemented noise reduction measures, dust control, and environmental safeguards. Yet the protests continued, and tensions only grew as the project pushed forward. The question remained: would the benefits outweigh the long-term costs? Only time would tell. Mountains, rivers, and resistance. As the Trans Mountain Expansion Project trudged forward, the construction teams faced challenges far beyond what was expected. One of the most difficult sections ran through steep mountainous terrain, where workers tackled grades of up to 30 degrees and unpredictable weather. To navigate the treacherous landscape, specialized contractors and drilling teams from Italy and other countries were brought in. But the real challenge wasn't just the mountains. It was the fierce resistance from local communities and environmental groups. Indigenous groups who had long fought to protect their ancestral lands were vocal in their opposition. Protests erupted along the construction routes, with concerns about the environmental toll on ecosystems, including the already endangered orca population. The project also involved 52 trenchless crossings, where advanced horizontal directional drilling minimized disruption to rivers, roads, and railways. Despite these efforts, the protests didn't subside. With the growing backlash and the challenges of implementing the project, the question loomed: would the long-term benefits outweigh the growing costs? $6.8 billion to $34 billion. What began as a $6.8 billion project to expand the Trans Mountain Pipeline quickly turned into a multi-billion-dollar saga filled with delays, budget overruns, and political controversy. Initially, the Canadian government bought the pipeline from Kinder Morgan, confident that the expansion would bring much-needed economic growth and reduce dependency on the U.S. But by February 2020, the cost estimate had jumped to $12.6 billion, and by 2022, it soared again to $21.4 billion. The final tally, however, stunned everyone: $34 billion. Much of the increase in costs came from higher labor and steel prices, as well as complications from the COVID-19 pandemic. As construction faced delays, the costs kept climbing. Political pressure mounted as taxpayers grew concerned about the ever-increasing budget. Despite the criticism, the government remained committed, hoping the long-term benefits would justify the colossal investment. Would the expansion ultimately pay off? Or had Canada poured billions into a project destined to face further hurdles? The regret. A year after the Trans Mountain expansion was completed in May 2024, it became clear that Canada's gamble was starting to pay off, but not without lingering questions. The expanded pipeline now could transport 890,000 barrels of oil per day, almost 3 times what the original system could handle. This not only allowed Canada to significantly reduce the discount it had been receiving for its heavy crude oil, but it also opened new markets, particularly in Asia. The first tanker loaded with crude at the expanded terminal was shipped to China, marking a new chapter in Canada's oil trade. But despite these victories, the price tag remained a bitter pill to swallow. Critics pointed to the skyrocketing costs, which had more than doubled from the original estimate, and questioned whether the environmental and social costs had been worth it. Indigenous protests continued, and concerns about the impact on local wildlife, particularly orcas, remained unresolved. While Canada had reduced its dependence on the U.S., the true cost of the project, financial and ecological, was far from clear. In the end, the Trans Mountain Expansion project reshaped Canada's energy landscape, turning a once controversial plan into a crucial piece of the country's economic future. The pipeline, now able to carry almost 3 times the oil it once could, has opened new markets, particularly in Asia, and reduced Canada's reliance on the U.S. But the journey was far from simple. Amid protests, budget hikes, and ecological concerns, the project tested Canada's resolve. Today, the project stands as a testament to the country's determination, but also as a reminder of the delicate balance between progress and preservation.